On April 10, 1912, thousands of people crowded the docks of Southampton, England. They were there to watch a machine that dwarfed the surrounding buildings prepare for its maiden voyage to New York. Building this ship cost $7.5 million, roughly $400 million today. That money bought state-of-the-art engineering, including a double-bottom hull, meaning the ship essentially had two outer layers of metal to protect against underwater collisions. But the real confidence came from its interior design. The lower section was divided into 16 separate watertight compartments. Even if the outer hull was breached and up to 4 of these compartments flooded, the ship would stay afloat. It was a mathematical certainty that led the public to declare it unsinkable. At the helm was 62-year-old Captain Edward John Smith, a highly experienced naval officer. Under his command, excitement was absolute. The company's vice president even stated publicly the ship was so safe it could never go down. Yet 2 days into its journey, the safest vessel in history sat at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. It took less than 3 hours for it to sink. The rapid demise came down to a chain reaction of technical failure, of human error, and corporate ambition. Long before the ship ever reached the Atlantic, a coal fire was already burning deep inside one of the bunkers. By the time the voyage began, the heat had weakened a critical section of the hull by up to 70%. This structural vulnerability was compounded by the hull's very construction. To keep the project on schedule, the manufacturers used brittle cast iron rivets instead of steel to hold the bow's metal plates together. Between the hidden fire damage and the brittle iron rivets, the ship that pulled out of Southampton was already a fragile vessel. It was sailing directly into an ocean filled with ice. Visibility was further compromised by a last-minute crew shuffle. When David Blair was reassigned right before departure, he accidentally took the locker key to the crow's nest's only pair of binoculars with him. On a dark, moonless night, the lookouts were forced to rely entirely on their naked eyes. Behind the scenes, corporate pressure was mounting. Joseph Bruce Ismay, the director of the White Star Line, pushed for the ship to break transatlantic speed records to ensure a marketing victory for the maiden voyage. Over the course of the journey, the radio room received 7 separate warnings from other ships about dense ice fields ahead. Despite this, Captain Smith kept the ship traveling at 21.5 knots, roughly 40 kilometers per hour. He never ordered the engines to slow down. A fire-damaged hull held together by brittle iron was now speeding blindly through an ice field. The margin for error was completely eliminated, all to satisfy corporate pride. At 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, the lookout spotted a massive iceberg dead ahead. They rang the running bell, and the crew desperately tried to turn, but the ship was moving too fast. The ice scraped along the right side of the hull, striking the exact spot that had been weakened by the coal fire. The iceberg's weight pushed the steel plates inward, snapping the brittle cast iron rivets. Seams parted, letting water rush in. The ship was engineered to stay afloat if 4 compartments flooded. The scrape tore open 6. The mathematical limit was breached, dragging the ship downward. Help was closer than the crew realized. The SS Californian was idling just 20 kilometers away, having spotted the Titanic's distress flares. However, their radio operator was off duty, and the captain assumed the lights in the sky were merely a late-night celebration for the wealthy. The engineering failed under the pressure of the ice, and the human safety net failed due to sheer negligence. The ship and its passengers were entirely on their own. The scale of the death toll was ultimately determined by a design choice. The ship carried only 20 lifeboats, barely enough for half the people on board, because additional boats were seen as an aesthetic blemish on the first-class deck. This chart shows the harsh reality of who made it onto those boats. While the official rule was women and children first, survival was dictated by ticket price. 60% of first-class passengers survived, compared to just 24% of those in third class, whose lower deck gates were largely kept locked during the initial panic. By 2:20 a.m., the water's weight lifted the rear of the ship high into the air. The immense strain tore the vessel in half. The musicians who had played on the deck until the very end, and Captain Smith, who stayed at the wheel, plunged into the -2 degrees Celsius water. A rescue ship, the Carpathia, finally arrived around 4 in the morning to pull the surviving lifeboats from the freezing ocean. When the news reached land, the public was forced to process a staggering death toll of more than 1,500 people. Corporate vanity and structural compromises set the disaster in motion, but the highest price was paid by the poorest passengers trapped below deck. For over 70 years, the exact resting place of the wreck remained a mystery. It wasn't until 1985 that oceanographer Robert Ballard finally located the remains 3,800 meters below the surface, confirming once and for all that the ship had violently split in two. The sheer scale of the tragedy forced a total rewrite of global maritime safety laws. It led directly to the creation of the SOLAS Treaty, which immediately mandated 24-hour radio watches and required every ship to carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board. Today, the rusted bow sitting on the ocean floor serves as a permanent monument to the danger of human arrogance. It proves that no matter how advanced our technology gets, it can never outrun the consequences of blind pride. If you want to explore more stories where nature outsmarted engineering, hit the subscribe button and check out our next video.